take a second to introduce myself. My name is Jenny Burton. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing here at Boardable. I am passionate about nonprofits. I've kind of worked in marketing tech most of my life, and I'm really excited to be working closer with nonprofits in my day job. I serve on 3 different boards right now, and so nonprofit boards and nonprofit board management is really near and dear to me, and something that I think is just amazing, to be a part of. So we also have Vanessa Lockshin, who's joining us. She's the president of the Storytelling Nonprofit. She's also written a book by the same name. So she's also an author and has written a book by the same name, and is really an expert when it comes to leveraging email for your fundraising for your nonprofit. So I can't wait to turn it over to her here in a couple of minutes and let you hear from her all of the great advice that she's going to give you leading into that big day of Giving Tuesday, as well as a lot of tips, tricks, and insights that you'll be able to utilize throughout the next year as well. So our agenda, we did our quick introductions. I'm going to give you a Boardable 101, and we'll get started with a quick poll kind of to level set, see where everybody is. Then we're really going to let Vanessa dig in to this. I think it's an interesting and specific topic that is just so relevant for all of us that are in that fundraising end of year season. So it's really going to be focused on Giving Tuesday email fundraising. We'll have a poll, allow for some questions, and wrap up and have some announcements at the end. So if you're not familiar with Boardable, if you're not one of our customers, or if you've never heard of us, we ultimately help nonprofit organizations overcome friction and operate at the next level. We do this through a board management platform that's specifically designed for nonprofits. We serve about 2,000 organizations, about 300,000 board members across 140 countries. So we have a really big reach, and we're really passionate about making sure that our tool helps nonprofit organizations of all types, whether they're charitable, whether they're member-based, whether they're associations, really perform at their best. And so that's kind of our mission and what we're focused on here at Boardable. We do have nonprofits and organizations of all sizes that love Boardable. And so I actually have back-to-back logo slides. I always like to call these NASCAR slides because NASCAR cars have so many logos on them. But these NASCAR slides, these are some of our bigger customers. But I also just want to note we also have smaller nonprofits and smaller organizations that see a lot of value and leverage Boardable as well. So I am going to go ahead and jump into our first poll before I hand it over to Vanessa, which is really, just starting out. How confident are you in your current Giving Tuesday email strategy? So I'm going to go ahead and load this poll up, and you'll be able to respond to this here. And I apologize. I am having a little bit of trouble getting this poll to go live right now. And so if you want to just drop it into chat about how confident you are right now for your Giving Tuesday email strategy, we'll start that route, and hopefully we can get the other poll working in here. So that is my bad, and we will sort that out. So if you want to drop into chat kind of your confidence level on your Giving Tuesday email strategy, the poll is live. I'm sorry, I did maybe pre-publish them, and sometimes they jump up. So I apologize. I think I might have published that one a little bit earlier than I usually do. So let's see. Okay, awesome, guys. Thanks for the real-time assist. I think sometimes I don't put those live until real time. So it seems like a lot of folks are either not sure, some confidence for sure, and we have somebody that's very confident, which is awesome. So hopefully, whoever that is, you can drop in some of your insights as well into chat, because we're always here to learn as well. So thanks, everybody. I think most of the votes are in, and we kind of we have a lot of not sure or somewhat confident in there. So awesome. Well, without further ado, I'm really excited to hand it over to Vanessa, who's going to walk us through Giving Tuesday email strategies, hopefully gain some confidence, gain some insights for this exciting fundraising season ahead for all of us. So Vanessa, I'll let you go ahead and share, and we'll go from here.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Well, hey, everyone. Glad to be here with you all today. Let me just take a second here to get my screen share up and going. So I know lots of you are feeling a little unsure about Giving Tuesday. Fair enough. It is a big event for a lot of organizations, right? And I think that this year, unlike past years, there is a lot of uncertainty around fundraising. And for me, I've been in email fundraising for 15 years now, and I'd say I've seen a lot of ebbs and flows in those 15 years working on email fundraising campaigns, but especially in the last couple years, there's been a lot of like tumultuous things happening out in the ether. And add to that too, right now at this moment, right? Like we're a lot of people are facing their own personal economic insecurity or feeling kind of the pinch of inflation. We have an election that's about to happen too, right? So there's just a lot of things right now that are happening that can make the fundraising environment feel rather unstable for everybody. That said, though, I'm personally excited about Giving Tuesday. I'm always excited about year-end fundraising because it is a time of year where if people are going to give, they usually are going to donate at that time when you make an ask. And a lot of people are just primed to do that at the holiday season. And for a lot of you, Giving Tuesday will be that time where you are kicking off that campaign and hopefully starting on your path to raising a lot of money throughout the end of the year. I will say, whether or not you decide to run a Giving Tuesday campaign this year, I hope that what I share around email, like it is applicable to email fundraising year round. So you can take a lot of these tips and roll them into campaigns you might run next year or at some other point in time. So I hope that it'll serve you regardless of whether or not Giving Tuesday is in the cards for you this year. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things around writing emails. We'll talk about some elements of effective fundraising writing that really can drive results in email. We'll talk about writing subject lines. And then I'll also talk about optimizing like calls to action inside the email as well. So those are some of the pieces that we'll talk about. I will say though, email, like there are so many levers, right, that can impact the success of email. And, what I'm going to focus on today is what we write inside the email, the copy, the words, the content that's inside that somebody is looking at. And I feel like this is an important one to talk about because while it is like one of the basics of email, it's one that we often overlook when we talk about strategies and tactics to improve email fundraising for organizations. But I think that it's also a lever that can have a really big impact. If you say something that's strategic, that's thoughtful, that makes a really good case for giving, that's powerful in its statements, those are all things that can land with donors in different ways. And so hopefully you can take away some tips about that. I want to help you make the most of that real estate inside your emails. And there's a lot that you can do with that. Just out of curiosity for all of you, I don't have a poll for this, but you can let me know in the chat. For those of you who have done email fundraising before or have an email list, how do you feel about writing fundraising emails? You just tell me like feeling great, feeling confident, maybe it's your least favorite activity of all the things that are on your plate. Nervous, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, Joanne, love writing. Glad to hear that. Getting to the contact is what scares you. Yeah, fair enough, Evelyn. I will say, for me, writing is a huge part of what I do in a day-to-day. So I feel fairly like confident about that. But when I talk with clients, when I talk with customers, almost nobody else that I work with out in the sector is doing email fundraising as 100% of their job. They all have lots of different hats that they're wearing, probably like a lot of you. And so because of that, writing is just one of many things that you're doing. And so it's not something that you're regularly practicing and maybe building the muscle up on. But it can be challenging. So one of the things that I'll say when we talk about some elements of effective fundraising writing here in just a second is that these are a way to help yourself kind of create an outline or a roadmap for what you're going to write in your email. And I think that it's one of the things that can help you overcome one of the largest challenges with writing emails, which is where do you start? What do you say? So I hope that this will just help you kind of gather some of your thoughts and make it actually easier to get into writing and start to get into that process. Okay, so let's talk about this. So when I work on fundraising campaigns and emails specifically, there are 5 pieces of information that I always want to nail down about what the campaign is about and what I want to say in the emails kind of consistently, or at least like have some through lines of those pieces throughout all the emails. And I say this because, we have to say something more compelling in these emails than it's Giving Tuesday, so make a donation to us. That's not the best argument we can make that day. There's lots of reasons why people want to give beyond it's Giving Tuesday. So we have to dig a little bit deeper to figure out what are those reasons and how can we get those out in front of people today. So spending some time mapping out this information will help you do that. And as I said, also make it a little easier for you to actually write the email. So the first piece of this in really great email fundraising is what I call context. So when somebody drops into our email, when they open that and they read it, they need to know what's happening. Why are you emailing them? Why should the reader care about this? In some ways, you can think about this as the hook of your email. But we really want people to know, like, what is going on in this particular moment. Like, I think about some of the email lists that I'm on, World Wildlife Fund, for instance. I get emails regularly from them for things like it's International Shark Day, or it's Panda Day, or, it's like whatever environmental or animal holiday it is. They are telling me that is the reason and the context for why they want to talk to me today about pandas or sharks or whatever it is that they are sending an email about on that particular day. It can also not be tied into a holiday or an awareness day or something like that. It might be that there's something pertinent going on in your community right now. I work with a local mental health organization here in Victoria, BC, where I live. And one of the things that we're going to talk about this Giving Tuesday season is the fact that people are waiting 2 to 3 years through the public health system for psychiatric help with mental health conditions. And that's like way too long for somebody to be waiting if they need medication or they need help from a therapist or a psychiatrist. And so for us, like that fundraising campaign, that is an important piece of context. We want people to know that in order to have the conversation with them about what the problem is, what our solution is, and why they should donate to that. So that's my first thing for you to consider here. The second thing is the problem. So what is going on right now that needs to be addressed? And the question I often ask myself when I'm thinking about writing fundraising emails too is, why is the problem a problem? And it's a little bit of a weird, wonky question, but just to consider, like, why is this such an issue right now? Like, why is it such an issue that people are having to wait 2 to 3 years? Well, it means they can't get help when they need it now. It means that they might be unnecessarily suffering. It might mean that other aspects of their life are getting derailed. Like, there's all kinds of things where there's kind of the ripple effect of the problem. But it's also the thing that you're going to be raising money to solve and hopefully address in the process. So allow yourself to think about, like, what is the real issue here on the table? Like, what are we wanting to talk to people about, and why does it need to be addressed now? Kind of start to think about what is some of the urgency, some of those pieces that we want to talk about over time. The solution is another big piece of the email. So what is your nonprofit doing along with donors to solve this problem that you want to talk to people about? I know you all know what your solutions are. You have programs, you have services. It's the bread and butter of what you're doing. So this part is probably going to be easy for you to answer. But just knowing what that is and what you want to focus on in that email is really essential. So got 2 more to go here, and then we'll actually talk a little bit more about how we bring these things into emails. So we need to make an ask. And this might be an obvious piece. You may be thinking, Vanessa, we're talking about email fundraising. Of course, we need to make an ask. You might think that, but I see lots of emails that don't have a direct, clear ask in them to donate. And I would say the words donate now hyperlinked in your email do not cut it. Like, we need to actually have a tangible, concrete ask that relates back to the impact that we want donors to get excited about and be a part of. And so really thinking about, like, what is that complete sentence or maybe 2 sentences that's going to make the ask for our fundraising email that much more compelling once we've given people some information about what we're doing. All right, and the last element here of effective fundraising writing is urgency. Urgency is so essential to direct response fundraising, whether you're doing direct mail or email or other types of direct response. We really need to give people a reason to donate today instead of a month from now. That's how I always think about it. And in some ways with Giving Tuesday, right, like that, there's some urgency that can be baked in there. Like maybe you have a specific fundraising goal, like you're trying to raise $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 in this 24-hour period. And so your urgency is, we're trying to meet this goal today, like help us meet this goal today. And that can be part of it. There might be a matching gift, and that might be part of the urgency that you can build in, like this short-term opportunity to have a gift matched and have the impact go twice as far, whatever you want to think about there. There can also just be the inherent urgency of the problem itself, right? Like there's urgency in needing to solve the problems that our organizations want to solve. And so you can also think about that being part of what we want to talk about in email fundraising. So just to give you an example of like how this all shakes out and what this looks like in an email, I want to walk you through an example real quick of what this looked like for one of my clients when we worked on this with them. This was from their Giving Tuesday campaign 2 years ago. One of our clients for IDBC that works with children and their families who need extra assistance for children who have special needs or complex healthcare needs. So the context for their campaign was that thousands of children across BC needed additional resources, support, and equipment to thrive. So they weren't getting their needs met through public healthcare system, and parents were having to pay out of pocket with it. So that leads us into the core problem here. Too often what the kids needed wasn't covered by health insurance, and parents were having to foot the bill, and it was getting really expensive for a lot of families. Like I remember during this time, I talked to a family who needed a power wheelchair for one of their children. And that power wheelchair cost, I think it was something like $28,000. It was incredibly expensive. And I had no idea how expensive some of these pieces of medical equipment were, but they were costs that these families were having to grapple with and things that we wanted to talk to donors about that they may not know about or think about in their day-to-day lives if they didn't have a child or a family member who needed equipment like this. So the solution for this campaign, Variety BC and the donors can provide the support through grants to the kids and their families so that they have what they need, so that things like a wheelchair or a continuous glucose monitor or speech and language therapy were covered and kids can continue to grow and develop and live great lives. So the ask for the campaign, by donating to Giving Tuesday, you can help fund the essential equipment resources that kids need in order to thrive. And the urgency for this campaign was a matching gift. So we really leaned into that idea that, they didn't do a lot of matching gifts in their campaigns. So that was kind of like a special short-term opportunity for donors to be a part of. So what I would suggest to you, if you're interested in kind of mapping this out, is just take those 5 bullet points, that context, the core problem, solution, ask, and urgency, and just kind of do your own brainstorm about this and start to think about like, what is the lay of the land for your Giving Tuesday campaign and how do you want to fold that into the emails? And we can fold that into the emails through how we write them. And I'll talk about that here. So when we weave this into an email, I like to think about the structure of really good fundraising emails. And this is the general structure that I use. And I'll talk about these elements, then we'll look at some examples a little bit more. Let's see, what do I want to say about this? Using the effective fundraising copy elements that we just talked about, we can weave them into an email that flows really beautifully and compels people to take action. So this is the general structure that I use when I write emails, and say I write like probably upwards of 200 fundraising emails a year for clients. And I use a 2-ask structure a lot of times. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do 1 ask instead. But there's 2 reasons that I do this. One, we don't want to bury the ask all the way at the bottom of an email. I see that happen a lot for organizations where they say a lot of really good things. Like they have a compelling case for giving. There's a good reason why people are going to care about what's going on. But they've written, like 100 or definitely more than 100, but maybe like 200 or 300 words. And there's like an ask way down at the bottom of the email. But chances are not everybody's going to scroll all the way to the bottom. People might read half the email and click away, or they might like look for a link above the scroll line before they have to scroll anywhere and think, okay, well, there's like no action for me to take here, and that email gets archived. So one of the ways that we can kind of offset that, try to optimize for more people clicking on our emails, is to make 2 asks. And I'll give you some examples of what this looks like in action here in a minute. I would say also the other thing, we all have short attention spans, right? So we kind of need to get into the ask pretty quickly. In the emails that I write, usually those first 3 pieces, the hook and the explainer, are typically about 125 to 150 words, and then we get into an ask pretty quickly. So it's very, very much at the top of the email for people. And then I like to make a second ask after that first one for one very important reason. There are people who are going to keep reading after that. We don't always know who, because we can see who clicks on what links in the emails. But the first ask that we make in an email may not convince everybody. So the point of having some additional information or another story in that email is to be able to just like pull apart your points a little bit more, extrapolate on what you said in the top half of the email in your argument for giving, and convince the unconvinced. That's how I always think of that second section of the email. we want to convince people. We want them to actually make a donation, and we can do that. We can continue to compel them with what we say inside that email. So I'm going to talk about each of these pieces of the email here in a second, and like what you can do to write them really well. I'll just say just briefly, the hook is that first part of the email where we're drawing people, and it's usually like 2 to 3 sentences typically, where we're like pulling people into the story and what's happening very quickly. We want to introduce people to the problem and the stakes of the problem and get people to continue to read. That's the goal of that. And I always tell people too, like, we want to think about putting like the most compelling information we have right in that top portion of the email. I remember years ago, not that long ago, probably like 2 or 3 years ago, reading an email that a client had sent, and they had hired me to take over writing emails for them for some campaigns. And I was reading emails that they had previously sent just to kind of orient myself to what they had done and how successful it had been. And sometimes like the problem that they were having with the emails was that the best, most compelling pieces of writing, sentences, words, were in the middle of the email, and they were just getting really lost. And so part of what I told them needed to happen was just, we need to like reorder some things here. Like, I remember leading into one of their fundraising asks, they had a line that was something like, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and that's especially true for a child with special needs. But it was just placed in a really random place in the email that didn't really flow. And I read that and I was like, that's a good point and a good line for people to kind of relate to around raising children. And it would be such a great opening line of the email to just immediately drop people into something and get them to connect with it and relate to it, and maybe want to keep reading about, well, why is it especially true for a family who has a child with complex healthcare needs? So anyways, the explainers in the email are basically those pieces where we're going to talk a little bit more about the problem, right? We want to make our case for giving. We want to talk about what the problems are. And we also want to pitch our solution and why donors will want to support what it is our organization is doing. It's a really important part of the email. It's not a huge portion necessarily. Like, you don't need to write paragraphs and paragraphs. We're not writing a case for support document that's, 50 pages long or writing an email. But picking like the most important information that will compel people, that will help them understand what's going on and why it matters, is what you want to focus on putting in there. And then of course we have the asks as well. So let me show you some examples of what these emails might look like in action, and then we can talk a little bit more about each of these pieces and how you can apply it into your own email writing. So this is an example from Variety BC. In fact, so I showed you a few slides ago, like how those 5 elements of fundraising writing kind of shook out for one of my clients' campaigns. This is actually an email from one of those campaigns. So I mentioned the power wheelchair. So the hook that we had for this really leaned into kind of that idea of like surprise and maybe even a little bit of shock. In fact, we definitely use the word shock. So I was shocked when I realized that a power wheelchair costs more than what I pay for my car. That was actually something the executive director said to me when I interviewed her at one point. And I just remember thinking, like, that is a really good piece of information that can just like ground people in what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how expensive medical equipment is and get people hopefully interested, and also feeling maybe that sense of like a little bit of outrage, not necessarily outrage, but like the sense of shock, the sense of like, how could it possibly cost this much for families to have these kinds of things for kids? So also one of the things that this taps into is this idea that there's kind of some statements of principle that people can just agree with. Like, should a power wheelchair cost more than someone's car? No, like people might be like, no, that shouldn't be a thing. So if we can give people things to kind of nod along and agree with and be like, yeah, I agree with that, or that's wrong, like that shouldn't be happening to people out in our community. Those are things that we can all get on the same page about and start to dig into a little bit more in the arguments we might make in our email. Now, looking at this now several years later, I would tell you I've definitely edited down those 4th and 5th paragraphs into one call to action there. But the explainer just kind of goes on to say, all too often what special needs children need to thrive isn't covered by healthcare, leaving their families scrambling to figure out how to come up with thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands, that they don't have. And then it went on to say, we want to ensure that any family with a special needs child won't have to worry about how they're going to afford the resources and equipment that child needs. Pretty straightforward, right? Like it's nothing overly complicated. We're not getting into the weeds of like medical jargon or like how the organization goes about granting these kids with what they need. It stays pretty straightforward. And you can do this as well. Like you just need to think about a couple of sentences that characterize what you're doing in a way that's going to be compelling and meaningful to somebody who's reading that email. In the second part of this email, we went on to share a story about one particular child who had needed a power wheelchair and talked a little bit about how it was so difficult for him to just live his day-to-day life without that kind of equipment in his life. So you can do this as well in your own emails. So I like to think about that second part of the email as being a place to really illustrate what we're talking about in more depth. And so, finding that story that can really highlight the points that you're making about the problems in your community, the problems people are facing, why what you're doing is so important, can really give people that clear, concrete example of the difference that they can make with their donation. Also celebrating donor contributions, right? And being able to reiterate to people the importance of what they're doing through giving is an important thing that we can do throughout an email. We don't need to hide that philanthropy can do really great things for our organizations. We can be transparent and say, because of your support, like we can help kids like Jeremy, or with your support, we can help more kids like this. Like we can make those statements. The other thing I'll just point out here too, before we talk a little bit more about some of these pieces, you might notice in these emails, I've hyperlinked huge sentences. And there's a reason for that. I did a lot of testing on this a couple of years ago about whether or not if we hyperlinked the words donate now versus like the entire sentence or entire paragraph, were we going to get better click-through rate and also more donations? Because so many people are using mobile, if you only hyperlink the words donate now, they are hard to find sometimes and hard to click on. So I now opt to hyperlink whole sentences and just make it very, very easy and obvious for people to know where to click and what to do, which is something you can also do. I know some of you probably use buttons in your emails as well. I would also encourage you beyond just using a button to at least try hyperlinking one sentence in there. Okay, so let me talk to you a little bit about like writing a really good hook for your email, and then we can talk about some of these other pieces. So the first few sentences of your email, as I said, are where you want to introduce the stakes and the problem you want to get people reading. This tends to emphasize some combination of like need, relevance, and urgency. So those pieces of what's happening right now, what do people need? Why is it so important? Like what is contextually happening in the community, in the region, wherever you're working? And what's the urgency to it, right? Like what's the problem with not solving this problem? Like if we don't resolve this thing for people, what's going to happen? So thinking about that can be really useful. I always think about, the first sentence or two of the email is where we're putting a reader into the action. And, we want to get them into the story. We want to get them into like what is happening for the organization pretty quickly. One of the ways that I do this when I edit my own writing is I tack on this sentence, like sort of sentence. I temporarily put at the beginning of my first sentence in the first paragraph, let me get straight to the point. And if I have not gotten straight to the point right after that in the opening of the email, I need to rethink some things. And it's one way that I'm able to help myself get more quickly into what is going on. I don't know for some of you, but I sometimes find that like I will take like the meandering route to getting to the important point in emails. If somebody let me, I'd probably write 1,000 words. But I find that tacking on that sentence in my editing, like let me get straight to the point, will help me edit and be a little bit more discerning about where I'm starting that email and like get it into a really good place. Yeah, and I think the last thing I would say just about the hook is that, it gives the reader, right, the most compelling information to keep reading. Like I said earlier, like you don't want to hide that best information until way down in the ask that you're making in the email. Like put it up front. Like people want to know that. Like if there's a really severe problem in your community, if there's a really exciting opportunity to make a difference for people, like be clear about that and just say it up front. Don't beat around the bush on this. Okay. So we talk a little bit more about like explainers. This is where we really want to establish our compelling reasons for giving inside the email. So I say compelling reasons for giving. By that, I mean like, what is like the number one reason why people should give to this? And I say number one because you don't want to give people like a laundry list of like 5 reasons why they should donate. You want to give people one really compelling reason, your best reason for giving, as opposed to like 2 or 3 or 4 mediocre watered down points for giving. So think about like, what is that one reason? What's the difference that giving is going to make today on Giving Tuesday that can build that case for support for your organization? One of the ways that I think about this is just explaining and thinking about like why this moment is significant and how supporters' contributions can make a difference. So sometimes it's just about thinking about like, what is the opportunity here right now? Like, why is it a good idea for people to donate? And why is this moment a really exciting moment for that? So just run through Rolodex of emails I've written recently and think about that. So for one of the campaigns that I'm working on right now, that reason for giving is, as I said earlier, the Community Mental Health Organization, their reason for thinking about like getting people to give right now is that a lot of their clients are having to wait extensively long times for help through the public healthcare system. And so this is a moment to show people that the community cares about them getting mental health support, and we can help expedite that through other channels and other means. And so it's an opportunity to come together and make sure that people have what they need and have the support and resources and networks and communities to be able to thrive with like whatever mental health condition that they might be living with. The other thing that I think about with an explainer in that middle section of an email is like, what is the information people need to know to buy into what you're telling them? You, as somebody who works at your nonprofit, you know a lot, right? Like you're there all the time and you know the ins and outs of what's happening. And the ins and outs of like the bigger context of like the issue or whatever cause you're working on. But your donors are not like that, right? Like they're living their lives. They've got lots of other things going on. Like they're not tracking the small nuances of potentially of like what your organization is doing. So, I would just encourage you to think about like all the facts that you know about your organization, about the cause, about what's going on, about why you help and how you help. And just think about like, what is some of that essential information that someone might need to buy into what you're telling them? Like, for instance, if I'm telling somebody that waiting 2 to 3 years is too long to wait for psychiatric help, what else might they need to know to care about that even more? Like they might care about that fact on its surface. I'm sure people will, but like thinking about it in other ways, like 2 to 3 years, like that might mean that somebody may not be able to work because they don't have the right medication that they need for bipolar schizophrenia disorder in order to be able to be more functional. It might mean that somebody is having a hard time maintaining housing because they don't have a job. So just building out that picture for people a little bit more so that they can think about what this means. What can we make this information mean, and why people need to care about it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about making an ask in the email and also getting your call to action a little bit more optimized. So there's 3 pieces I think about in a call to action. I always want it to be specific and direct, tangible or concrete in some manner, and reminding donors of their impact. I know some people will, like when I say specific and tangible, people will think like, oh, you mean like $20, like we'll fund this thing at our organization. It doesn't have to be that. Like we can still be tangible and direct without saying like, if you donate $20, here's what we'll do exactly with that $20. That's one way to go about it. But like, for instance, with Variety BC in that email that I shared with you earlier, like one of the things that we would say is that, your donation helps us to fund the equipment, resources, and therapies that kids need to thrive. And that was like as specific and concrete as we ever wanted to get. We never wanted to say like $100 will fund an hour of speech therapy. Instead, we just said like, your donation will help us do these 3 things. And that was a repeatable messaging point for us often in the calls to action. So just think about what that could be for your organization. Like what are kind of the 1 or 2 things that you're consistently able to do because of donations? How can you characterize that or summarize it so that people get the gist of it, again, in the call to action? I would just say, like, in terms of making your call to action stand out and hopefully getting more clicks on it, because that's all what we want in our emails, I would think about like action verbs, right? So donate now, like donate is certainly one of those words, but like act now, help our community now. Like there's lots of things that like other words that we can use there to be compelling and creative in making that call to action. The thing I would just say is that you want to make sure that it's still obvious that you want people to donate. So, like if I wrote an email and rather than say like donate now, I said something like make a difference today and I hyperlinked that, like people may not read that and think like, oh, they're asking me to donate. They may think like make a difference, like might mean any number of things. So we want to be clear about that and just be direct as well in the process. Like don't go too far down a creative writing hole with that. As I said, underline and hyperlink like entire sentences can definitely work in your favor for sure. And ask twice. Like that is probably my biggest piece of advice here in how you structure your emails, is just asking more than once, putting more than one link in there. I'll just show you another example of an email that I worked on last year for Pride Month. Actually, this is not a Giving Tuesday email, but it's one that I really like, and I thought it might be helpful for all of you to see, just as like another example of fundraising emails out in the wild. This is for YMCA of Greater Toronto, and they were fundraising during Pride Month to help 25 youth who lived in one of their 2SL GTBQIA plus housing facilities. And there was like the campaign itself was kind of complicated to explain in some ways, because there was the layer of like of gender and sexual identity and orientation and all of that. And so one of the things that we really wanted to do in the campaign was still think about like, how can we be clear and just explain what's going on without getting like too convoluted and into like a lot of nuance that maybe donors don't necessarily need. So one of the things that we just wanted to start out with was like this basic fact that like, they know that helping people who are unhoused find housing can really make a huge difference in their lives. And so that was like something that we started with as a stated fact that like, we know that the support we provide to these youth can transform their lives. Like it's really that powerful. And so to us, like when I wrote that hook and thought about it some more, it was really this opportunity to hopefully get people thinking, well, like, how does it transform their lives? Like, and how do they know this? Like, tell me more about that. So, and that was where we kind of got a little bit more into a narrative from their housing director, who was able to say, like every day we're working with people to like move into achieving housing stability and healthy adulthood. And there's so many incredible stories that come out of that, including the manuals. And so this email started kind of launching into a story pretty quickly. And I got into that some more. So one of the things that I'll say too here is like this weaved in a lot of quotes and like use that first person storytelling really well. So I think one of the things I see happen a lot of times in emails is when people tell stories, they pull like huge quotes. They'll be like walls of text from somebody about their experience, which is great and important. And I don't want to take away from that. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But in email writing, like one of the things we have to think about is like, how can we pick up like the most important pieces of that story and just like highlight them really well. So in this one, for instance, like Emmanuel told us, without YMCA Sprout House, I would have had to move from shelter to shelter, and that would have been my life. He said a lot more about how important the YMCA was, but that was one of the things we wanted to highlight, was that without this help from this organization, his life would have been really precarious. Like he just would have been moving all the time. And like, that's really stressful and like has a lot of implications for him. And so the email kind of continued on and continued to make that case about like why housing was such a fundamental way to help these young people, and also, kind of the wraparound support that it offers, and using some quotes to kind of talk about that a little bit more. So some examples for all of you to consider. I would say too, like one of my pieces of advice to people, if you're looking to improve your email skills and like looking to just like, I don't know, become a better email writer, it's like get on some different email lists and just start to look at what people are doing and think like, do I like this? Why do I like this? What's working here? What might not be working? And like, you don't necessarily have access to the data of those emails, but it'll give you a lot of insights and thought, like food for thought about what you can do with your emails, and just some new creative inspiration for how to write them. Okay, so I want to talk about subject lines here before we go to some Q&A. So I want to ask all of you, and you can respond in the chat to me, what kind of subject lines make you want to open an email? Like this morning when you sat down at your computer, or maybe you looked on your phone first thing in your personal inbox, what subject lines like piqued your curiosity, where you're like, like curious about that, like what's going on here? Yeah, Jenny, new launches, new things. Yeah. Demetrius, like short teasing, like teaser type email subject line. Yeah, for sure. I'll just give folks another minute here to give me some answers. Carolyn, asking a question. Yeah, yes. Yeah, asking a good question for sure. Short, simple. Yeah, lots of things. Yeah. Oh, Lauren, emojis, interesting. Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. It's funny. I always have like split thoughts about emojis because I don't get any emails from people personally that ever use emojis in the subject line. And so when I see them in a subject line, it's usually from like a mass sender for an email list I'm on, but which I feel like is like a usually interesting thing. But yeah, they do catch your attention for sure. They stand out. There's lots of ways that they can do that. Yeah, something, yeah, Don, something find intriguing, shocking, thought-provoking. Yeah, all good examples. Okay, so I'm glad you all thought about this because these are all useful things for you to think about when you write subject lines. I'll share some of my guidelines for thinking about subject lines. I'll show you some that I like. I would say avoid the words Giving Tuesday, which you might think, Vanessa, why? Like people want to donate, it's Giving Tuesday. That is not the only reason why they didn't want to donate. And there are so many better subject lines that you can write that, as Don said, are intriguing and maybe thought-provoking that will get people to open that email. I guarantee most of your email list subscribers are getting, dozens of emails that day that have the words Giving Tuesday in them. There's nothing unique about that. And so challenging yourself to write a slightly different subject line that's a little bit more elevated, that gets to your impact, that maybe gets to the problem that you want to talk to people about, I think is going to be the way to go for you. Excuse me. I always try to write like a person. People open emails from people is one of my basic operating principles, and people read emails from people. And so, nobody wants to read an email that I've sent that says like October newsletter from such and such organization. Like they're going to want to read about like the success stories, the impact, like all of that. And so how can I kind of get to that a little bit more? But I would say the two most important pieces of advice I follow from myself on email subject line writing are always be just vague enough to be interesting. I'll give you some examples of what I mean by that, and also allude to a problem or the impact in the process as well. So I'll show you some subject line examples that have done well for me in past Giving Tuesdays. That top one there is from that Variety email. That was one of the best performing subject lines they had over the course of 3 years of campaigns. Parents can't keep up with these costs, right? That subject line tells us who we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about parents, which is probably a group of people might care about. They can't keep up with some costs. Like costs are the problems, but the word these, that's pretty vague, right? So like what costs are we talking about? Like what might be impacting them? Like what are these costs? Why is it a problem? That was a really great subject line in terms of like touching on some of those things. The difference you can make right now, that was one that did really well for us on an evening email that we sent last year on Giving Tuesday. This was when the third one there was the one we sent for a hospital last year. New moms shouldn't have to go through this. So again, like talking about like the character, the group of people we're going to talk about in the email, a problem, like alluding to something they're having to go through that clearly is difficult or maybe not pleasant, and people wanting to find out what that is. I won last year, put my name in there, but first name, you can help us cross the finish line. So if you're close to your goal, getting there, that can be a really great one. And then we also sent this last subject line 2 years ago, one wonderful thing you can do today. I feel like this is a really nice alternative. If you want to allude to Giving Tuesday or talk about like a difference people can make today, saying something like, one way you can make an impact today, or one way you can make a difference today. Like those are great alternatives to say, like, make your Giving Tuesday donation today, right? Like we want to talk to people about the impact and what they can do. All right, I've talked a lot. I know there's some questions, so I'm happy to go to those here in a second. I did just want to share before I flip over to questions. I have a free toolkit if any of you are interested in grabbing it. I'll put a link in the chat box for all of you. For your email campaigns, it has an email campaign planner and also a email calendar and performance tracker, which is the same thing that we use for all of our clients that we work on fundraising campaigns for. So if you're just looking for some other tools and ways to get organized around email, I hope this can help you, and you download it for free.
Hey, Vanessa, that was amazing. The chat and the questions, I feel like this is such timely, great content. I learned a lot. This is so great. One question that did come up was around these slides and the availability of sharing those. Are you open for us to share these slides as a follow-up?
Yeah,
we usually share the recording, but there are some slides that have great content on them. So if you're okay with that, I'll just answer that question right now. It sounds like we'll share the slides as well. So we'll make sure that you get a PDF link out to these slides so that you can access these and share these with your colleagues as well. I know we are going to run a little bit tight on time. If it's okay, I'm going to jump back over to my Google document. Don't worry, we're getting to questions in just 1 second here. So let me share over. There we go. Well, that didn't quite work. Let me try again here to share over here. Okay, works much better. I got that infinite scroll, which sometimes happens. I did want to direct you all back over to the poll just to kind of get a pulse on after the webinar today, kind of the first changes that you'll be making or considering around your Giving Tuesday emails. There's several options around improving subject lines, strengthening calls to action, storytelling, all of those things. So if you drop over to that poll section over next to the questions and your chat section, you'll be able to fill out that poll and kind of let us know any of the changes that you're doing or that you might do based on this. And so I'm really excited to see those coming in. Looks like a lot of storytelling and subject lines are kind of the early responses. I am going to jump just a couple of more slides. Before we jump to the Q&A, which I am sure will run maybe towards the very end or over, I did want to just let everybody know we actually have another webinar next week. So that'll be next Tuesday, October 29th. That'll be at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I just wanted to know this webinar will be really great for Boardable customers, but there will also be takeaways for everybody. So we're going to really talk about how to plan your fundraising events, leveraging Boardable and some of the best practices, kind of the best practices for planning the events, and then how to use our platform to do that. So it'll be a little bit more product focused. We'll also be giving a sneak peek of our upcoming roadmap and some kind of new and exciting things that are coming into our platform. So that one will be a little bit more product focused, but we'd love to have all of you back for that. I know Giving Tuesdays coming up. I'm sure a lot of folks also have some fundraising events coming up. So we're really kind of trying to tie this season and end of year giving and really be thoughtful about where your headspace is right now. So thank you guys so much for attending. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we're going to jump into continuing to pick Vanessa's brain and learn more from her when it comes to these Giving Tuesday subject lines. There was a question about utilizing images, and I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that, Vanessa, like how much images, how much video, those types of things do you recommend using in these emails?
Yeah, so I certainly think you want to have elements of your branding. I didn't show those in the emails on my slides just in order to get all the text on there. But typically, like I recommend that organizations these days like keep their header banners in email like pretty low in height so that people can get into the email more quickly. I'm trying to think. I feel like usually ours are about like 300 pixels tall. If that's like a helpful reference point for people in case they're curious. I think images can be great, but it's got to be a good image, right? Like, so pick something that's like impactful, that helps to tell the story in a different way, that continues to tell the story in a different way. The one thing I always caution people against with images is don't rely on the image to do all the talking for you, especially if you have text on there, because not all images will download in every email program. So if you have like, if your only call to action is like a graphic that says like donate now, what if that doesn't download and people don't see it? That
Yeah.
might work against you.
Yeah.
So the other thing too that I think about with graphics and images is just like making sure that you use alt text. Like people do use screen readers and other accessibility tools these days, and so just like make sure you're factoring that into how you're uploading and formatting things.
Absolutely. Another question that came up was there when you were saying elements of a great ask. You mentioned instead of always saying like your $100 will buy 5 meals, that type of thing. You mentioned an alternative. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, do you think sometimes that $100 5 meals type of message works, or do you think that there's better ways to approach that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, $100 5 meals like definitely does work. There is like a tangibility factor. People like knowing that like their donation can do something specific and like they're able to help in a really concrete way, especially for smaller dollar donors, right? Who may not be able to write you a $5,000 check or a $100,000 check. Like they still want to know that their donation can make a difference. And I think that having those tangible, concrete asks like that, where like $100 can help fund 5 meals or something like that, like those are good for those kind of people, and like it's good for us to put those things in front of them. I would say like though for a lot of organizations, like they struggle to come up with like what is the concrete thing. Like it's easy, I think, for organizations that have like a community kitchen or do like services like nonprofit like counseling services or things like that. They may be able to say like $150 funds like an hour of counseling for one of our clients or something like that. But if you don't have that, or the things that you fund are really expensive,
Mm-hmm.
you still need to kind of drop into some layer of like concreteness in the
Yeah.
email. So for the emails that I was sharing, like one of the things that we said kind of over and over again as like a messaging point was that like your donations help to fund the resources, equipment, and therapies kids need to thrive. And it was like those three things. Like we didn't just say like you can make a difference in kids' lives with your donation. It was like, no, you can help fund resources, equipment, and therapies. And like that was kind of the level of specificity that we could get to a lot of times for that organization. But it worked really well. And as a key message too, like we wanted people to know like what are the basic things this organization is doing and like how are donors helping. That was a great like repeatable summary of
Yeah.
what they were doing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I had a question, and I was at a couple of nonprofit conferences over the last couple of months that there was so much conversation and talk about getting recurring donors, and I was curious, like, is Giving Tuesday a time to try to get people to become recurring donors, or how do you kind of interact with your recurring donors during that season? I'm kind of curious. Anything there?
It can be.
Yeah.
I will tell you that email is usually the hardest place to convert people to recurring donors. The
Okay.
clients I worked with over the years typically use other channels to convert people, usually phone or mail, in addition to email. But I think if email is the only place that
Okay.
you're asking, I would say like maybe adjust your expectations down a little bit. But that said, I have run campaigns for like monthly giving conversion, not on Giving Tuesday, but they work really well when we have I just want to think about like how to explain this. When we have two asks in the email, like the first ask, like the first hyperlink will be like become a monthly donor, like the call to action
Mhm.
will be become a monthly donor, and then right below that we'll put like, you know, or make a difference today with your one-time gift.
Yeah.
And the reason that I find that that works really well in email is that we don't want to lose the opportunity for people to donate. And if you only say like make a monthly donation, people might be like, well, like I'm not in a position to donate monthly, or
Yeah.
like that's not my thing. So keep the door open to that in your email and like still give people that opening to make a one-time gift and give them the place to do that. I feel like for Giving Tuesday, in my experience, like the campaigns that have worked best are the ones that have like a goal they're trying to reach
Mhm.
usually. And so like maybe the goal that you want to set if you're thinking about monthly donor conversion is like, we're trying to get 20 new monthly donors today on Giving Tuesday to help
Yeah.
us do this thing. So just think about like the framing of the goal around that. Like, and people might see like 20 people, like that's not a lot. Like I could be one of those people. And like that can help kind of fuel some of that momentum and conversion.
Absolutely. I'm going to limit ourselves to two more questions. And I have both of these. Please do feel free to drop additional questions in here. We'll be happy to follow up and give Vanessa your info and, make sure that we make these connections. So there was a question around the number of words or the length overall that you recommend. Is there a magic piece there, Vanessa, on that?
I mean, there's never a magic piece,
Yeah.
right? It's just like the frustrating answer I give to everybody. The top part of my emails, like where I write like a hook and explainer and the first ask, I typically aim to get somewhere between 140 to 160 words. And then the second part is probably about like another 100 to 125 words. But I also send emails that are just one ask. So that means the total email length might be between 140 and 160 words.
Yep.
I've definitely sent emails that have been longer, but that's because I needed more space to explain something that was like complicated and wonky. I think it really depends. And also it depends on your audience too, right? Like I worked with an organization years and years ago who like the bread and butter of what they did was like policy work. And like most of their donors were like policy wonks and like cared about like the economics of like all of this stuff. Like they regularly would send like 1,000 to 1,500 word emails to their list, and they did great. But that's because they knew their audience and they knew that people cared about that detail.
Yeah.
So some of it comes down to like what your audience expects, like what they want. Do they want more information? Do they want less information? Like what's ultimately going to tip the scales on how many conversions you get on the email? Right?
Awesome. We had one good question, so I'm going to jump this one, and then I'm still going to ask mine. So we're going to end up with two more.
Okay.
But how often do you recommend sending emails for general funding? Like, Julia had mentioned, is it quarterly, or what does a cadence look like?
So for general funding, so like how often should you be running a fundraising campaign is how I hear that. So I'm going to answer a slightly different version of that question and still answer yours just really. So one of the bigger picture things that we didn't talk about today is like, with getting good response rates when you run a campaign like Giving Tuesday, consistency of your sends and the relationship you build with your email senders over time makes a difference. So if you drop an email on Giving Tuesday and that's the first time you've emailed anybody in 6 months, it's probably not going to do as well because people haven't heard from you in a long time and they don't have that kind of relationship with you in their inbox. So one of the things I often tell people is that the success of our fundraising campaigns is based a lot on how engaged our email list is. And that in turn is influenced by the quality of the emails we send and the content, and also how frequently we're sending them to give people things to engage with. Should you be like a political campaign and send 12 emails a day? Absolutely not. Nobody needs to do that. So, for most of the clients that I work with, and, they have email list sizes ranging anywhere from like 5,000 subscribers up to about 50,000 right now. They're sending about like an email a week and sometimes an email every other week. But we also have moments during the year, typically quarterly, to circle back to Julia's question, where we run a fundraising campaign where we dial up the volume a little bit more. And I'm okay with that because usually there's like a specific goal that we're trying to reach in that week. There's something that we're trying to accomplish. And for the short term of like trying to meet that fundraising goal, it does make more sense for us to send some more emails, but we're not going to do that all the time. So, but I would say like if you're new to email fundraising, Julia, you're just trying to figure out like a cadence, I think a quarterly campaign is a really good place to start.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Last question. How do you recommend people leverage AI as part of their kind of email writing and email strategy? Is that something that you do with your clients, or kind of how do you look at that?
It's not something I do personally. So I have a hard time answering that. I think the thing I would just say is that if you're going to use AI is not going to write it 100% for you. Like you still have to be you, and you still have to edit things, and you still have to discern, is this actually good? So don't just go into using AI assuming like this is going to write the best email possible and we don't need to do anything else with it. That's a bad working assumption. And I would just say like the thing that I generally see with AI writing is it doesn't sound like a person wrote it. Like that is going to be the number one thing you're going to have to edit for yourself when you get something written by one of the AI programs, is making it sound like a person wrote this. And I think that's like one of the bigger challenges.
Yeah. No, totally. So it sounds like maybe using it potentially as a starting point, but definitely not the final draft type of
Yeah, I
situations.
mean, I think, for me, like in my, like, I think a lot of people use AI, right, these days for like inspiration or a starting
Mhm.
place or like where, like, how can I get going? What kind of subject line
Yeah.
should I send? Like, honestly, like I look at my own inbox and that's a function
Yeah.
of just like how many nonprofit email lists I'm on.
Yeah.
But like I
Yeah.
go through and I look like what have people been saying? Or like what did everybody do at Giving Tuesday last year? Like
Yeah.
what were some more creative campaigns I saw? What can inspire me from like colleagues and peers that I have out in the field? I don't know. That's me
Yeah.
personally,
No,
where I go for
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
No, absolutely. In a former life, I did some retail email marketing, and we would print off emails and kind of put them on an inspiration board. And I think that, like, while that feels very antiquated right now, it's really kind of a fun exercise too. To be like, does this align with what we're trying to do, and look at those. I would love to have you back again, Vanessa. This was like such a great webinar. I feel like really great engagement. I'd love to at some point, kind of talk about how we engage the board in some of these activities to get more email subscribers, and kind of how the board can help, and kind of tie those pieces together a little bit more. But this was amazing. Thanks so much. We will be following up with the recording, with the slides. Make sure you guys know about next week's webinar, which will be really great, a little bit of a different flavor, but would love to have you all back for that as well. So thanks so much for attending. Thanks again, Vanessa. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.